I was just told that the mic is not on, so I just repeat. So that now let's get it started. I would like to invite Guido, our moderator for the session 2, to be, you are already on stage. You can introduce the theme of the session, you can introduce the panelists and the speaker, and 2 of them are online. Guido, you are on.
What it means to value nature specifically for businesses and also for governments. We have a hybrid panel here. So I'm very pleased to invite Makoto Haraguchi from MS&AD insurance company to join us. You'll introduce yourself properly in a moment, please, if you just join me here. We're also very fortunate to have Rong Yu from S&P Global joining us remotely from Singapore. Thank you very much, Rong, for joining us. And we will be joined in a moment by Vera Songwei from the Brookings Institution, who is one of the leading macroeconomists globally working on these issues. What we'll do is, just like with the previous panel, I'd just like to invite the panelists to just give some brief opening remarks from your perspective, and would invite you to also just introduce yourselves properly. It's better that you do this yourselves than me. And then we'll have a conversation really picking up seamlessly from the previous conversation. We just want to dig a little bit deeper. But Makoto, I was wondering if we could start with you. And particularly, you've been leading this work from all imaginable perspectives, inside business, inside parliament policy, the environment ministry, and you're also a driver behind the TNFD work here in Japan. And so just question, would love to get your views on what is it Japanese companies are doing and can do to, in our words, put nature on the balance sheet.
Thank you, Guido-san. Hello, everyone. I'm Makoto Haraguchi from MS&AD Insurance Group, and I'm a TNFD task force member as well. Yeah, responding to your question that last month TNFD issued the first status report during the Climate Week New York City, and the number of TNFD adopters is rapidly increasing. So the number becomes double in last 2 years. So, and amazing to see the 30% of them of companies are headquartered in Japan. So yeah, I may say that Japan is one of the leading country in the nature positive momentum. So I often many people ask me why Japanese companies so positive and the nature positive. So this enthusiasm stems from the deep cultural resonance with TNFD's concept being we are embedded nature, which mirrors a traditional Japanese sense of nature. We are part of nature. That is shaped by the Shintoism. So it's a kind of a spiritual reason for Japanese. As also the Guido-san mentioned that the Japanese government is very supportive for such kind of private sector momentum. So Japanese government already developed a nature positive economy transition strategy, and also it's under the Japanese government NBSOP. So that provide that signal to the private sector to this is a direction to nature positive economy, and so I think the Japanese firms see the TNFD as a way of express sustainability beyond carbon metrics. So some of the companies involved with TNFD from its early stages have provided us positive feedback. They stated that it is an appropriate method for comprehensively expressing their sustainability mind and measures. They had previously felt limitation in the way investors comparing companies' sustainability measures based solely on GHG emissions. So I think that those TNFD adopters are ready to listen to the idea of the putting nature on balance sheet. So one of the challenges I may say from my personal assumption, in the integrating nature into their risk management cycle and the accounting system is it is needed the C-suite level of buy-in. It's very important. But when we see the C-suite level people in Western company, they have enough vacation to go out for skiing in glacier area and go out for yachting. And yeah, when we see the Japanese management people, they are very, very busy. They don't have enough vacation time. So they just go out for hot spring and playing golf in 2 or 3 days. So I may say that one of the challenges to give the C-suite level the long vacation to feel the change of the environment.
Thank you very much. We're also joined by Lee Howell from the Villars Institute. Lee, we'll come to you in a moment. Do we have Vera somewhere on the line? Vera, can you hear us? And can you speak? Okay, so we're having some technical difficulties which we're resolving. So we'll come back to Vera in a moment. Lee, you have been involved in these issues also through leadership positions at the World Economic Forum. So you've been working on this public-private space, and you're taking a particular interest in technology. Could you just share your views on what role technology can play? What are you most excited about when it comes to using technology to put quote-unquote nature on the balance sheet?
Thanks Guido, and good morning, everyone. Sort of picking up in the morning's presentations, I guess we need to look at technology as an enabler in the context of big data. I think that's what's really, in many ways, very exciting, right? When you see Tom Crowder's work and you sort of realize the amount of data that's being collected and analyzed in real time and literally being reported in ways that are very quite meaningful for local actors, but also larger international entities that want to advance the nature finance agenda. But I think there's two things to think about. One is that, firstly, that Herbert Simon, the Nobel Prize economist, said, in a wealth of information, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention. So I think one of the things we have to look at this is it cuts two ways. We have more data than any civilization in the that's ever existed before us, and by leaps and bounds, but our capacity to process, act on that, to actually turn that information to knowledge and insight is increasingly constrained or limited. And I say that because I'll give you a data point. Every minute, there's about 500 hours of new content being uploaded onto YouTube, right? And so that's just to reflect on that. That means there's about 42 million minutes of content every day that's new. And that's just in YouTube and that form. So the amount of, putting aside the storage issue, if it's petabytes or zettabytes that we're going to have to store in the world, just how do we get through and work through all of that? And in that must be something that's useful to us. But the other side of it that's more, I suppose, encouraging is 25 years ago, there are about less than 1,000 satellites in orbit in the world today. What's good for the planet 25 years later is that there's over 1,000 satellites, that are actually dedicated to Earth observation, which is allowing some of the things that Tom and others pointed out today, that we can actually start to understand and measure and monitor nature, biodiversity loss and gain. And on top of that, there's another 10,000 satellites in orbit today, which allows us to basically be connected all the time across the world on the internet. If you think about the 4,000 or 5,000 satellites that are in low orbit for Starlink, yeah. So we're in this very special place. And in that, I think we need to somehow harness all of that towards the betterment of the planet. 4 or 5 years ago at the World Economic Forum, when I was working with my colleague Dominic Warway, we were proponents of a narrative called the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and how do we take all this technology and this data and for the betterment of humankind. So we were person-centric, but today we have to absolutely be planet-centric, right? So how do we do that? And I think in the context of today, I would sort of think something radical. One is that we need to embrace the digitization of nature. That sounds very paradoxical, but we have the capability to measure and monitor all sorts of different biomes and places in the world with pretty high accuracy and actually store that data on blockchain, distributed ledgers in a way that we can trust it. So we shouldn't embrace that, because the planet, as we're going to hear later today in terms of the planetary boundaries, we're transgressing, we've transgressed 6, possibly 7, and we need to be very vigilant and take urgent action. But again, it's how do you get attention to it? Because as I said, the more information, paradoxically, it's harder to get people's attention. And here I think, and Guido and I were discussing this yesterday at the Science, Technology and Society Forum in Kyoto. I said that for nature finance, it needs to be a fast follower, and there's 2 courses. There's climate finance, and Dominic elaborated quite a bit the lessons from climate finance. And I would say there's also crypto finance. Like, how can we actually use some of the lessons there to create markets where people value? Because after all, today the financial market is hard to understand generally, because the 2 most expensive assets today, at least in terms of the record prices, are gold and Bitcoin. And again, neither of them have any intrinsic yield, right? So they're valued as such. So why can't we get nature treated and appreciated in the same way? And I think one thing I would just sort of close is that many people are thinking about this, even myself. I'm looking at initiatives to explore tokens, non-fungible tokens. Can we actually take an area that we want to conserve and in a way treat it and monitor and measure its biodiversity loss and gain, and record that on a ledger, a blockchain ledger, which in turn can be a token, and which can then be, in a way, distributed, or at least create a market. Because one thing I think people forget is, you've probably heard of the Trump coin recently, and it went, millions were sold, and the value went up and went down. But the money that was made from that wasn't from the price activity, this buying and selling. It was from the exchange, right? So in that, one can imagine in some of these areas, we can actually make sure, going back to the earlier point of equity, we could still, I think, create platforms where we would, in a way, digitize, and then that way, sort of in a way, monetize these assets, but ensure that the benefits of that would flow to the communities. And we could, again, we have the data, and we would, maybe it would be a composite indicator, not just one, that would help us understand, right, the nature in terms of the relative health of the ecosystem, in terms of that nature unit that we're all looking for. And there's many units, but it's not as clean or clear, and it took a long time to get to the climate and carbon piece, but I think everyone we just saw is working on it. But then again, how can we accelerate things? And that's where the digital piece comes. So I just say, let's not, technology does have its limits and challenges, but we have this information. And lastly, this afternoon, there'll be a talk about artificial intelligence, because there's no way that without AI models that we could sort through this much data. It's just humanly impossible. But in that is an opportunity for something like large language models and other platforms to sort through it on our behalf. And I think ours is a good cause. And I know what I'm saying is a bit about speculating when it comes to digital currencies, but it's about stewardship and at the end of the day, but we need to act faster. And if we can work with this data and digitally, we can move faster, I think.
Thank you. So once again, I mean, we're not lacking data, but we're also having now increasingly the tools to analyze them, not just the ones that Tom showed earlier on the slide, but also AI. Let's come back maybe in a discussion on tokenizing nature and what we can learn from crypto, because crypto is obviously also a double-edged sword. There's lots of crypto applications that I think do not necessarily set a good model for what we want to see. Rong Yu, let's turn to you. You work at Standards & Poor's. Standards & Poor's, of course, takes a deep look at the economy, both individual companies, but also countries. And you will share with us, or could you please share with us some of the work and the findings from S&P on how companies are conducting nature assessment, and I'd be particularly grateful also if you could share your view on how material, from the perspective of S&P, a lot of your work is around ratings. Nature is becoming to businesses. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, dear moderator, my fellow panelists, and dear audience. Thanks for having me at the panel today. For those of you who are not familiar with S&P Global, we are a financial information business that provides a range of financial, commodity, and sustainability benchmarks, including the very well-known S&P 500 index, various credit ratings, and an annual corporate sustainability assessment, also known as CSA. So our role in the market has given us many opportunities to observe the evolution of business attitude and responses to the nature topic. One thing that really catches our attention is the ongoing discussion about the link between nature dependencies and credit risk. So in the past, very few companies actually recognize the link between business and nature as an internal issue for their core business strategy. Since the establishment of TNFD and many capacity building happening around the world, more and more business ask themselves, what would be the potential implication on my business, and especially under a severe and disruptive nature loss scenarios. So I mentioned that every year S&P Global does a sustainability corporate assessment. It's a survey that we send to companies, and we ask different questions based on the evolution of sustainability agenda, and now we see more and more companies saying that they have a policy on climate and started to develop policy on nature, and also doing a lot of different things to understand the implication of nature on their business. Similarly for financial institutions, right? A lot of banks, investment managements, they are started to look into the implication on their lending portfolio, investment portfolio, and the concept is simple. If over half of the global GDP is nature dependent, then a bank's loan book must be too. I want to mention a very interesting study that was published a couple months ago. 3 Singaporean banks published a research assessing the business case for nature on their portfolio. So they used the palm oil sector as a use case, and the group undertook scenario analysis to try to understand the possible credit impact of nature on their clients. So the results is very interesting. It showed very different impacts across different companies on the palm oil industries. Some were highly resilient if they are integrated business, while others on the upstream of the industry were highly impacted by nature risk, such as droughts, floods. So I think this demonstrates a pretty clear commercial need for financial institutions to understand each of their customers, because nature risk is very location specific. The situations vary depending on where they are based, how robust is the business, what's their financial performance. So it's a clearly business case that nature is impacting a company's financial performance, their ability to repay. So I think we're expecting to see more and more research, study, and practitioner research, especially in the space. Thanks, Guido.
Thank you very much. You have, we don't have Vera online. Okay, so we will hopefully be joined by Vera in a moment. Thank you, Rong, for making that link to nature risk, and maybe we can pick up on that. Makoto, I was wondering if I could ask you to perhaps expand on, because you work at an insurance company, so you'll be applying a risk lens in particular. What are the best ways, and what are the needs that you now see? And please feel free to focus on Japanese companies to recognize and to manage these risks more proactively. And how do you see the inclusion and the valuation of natural capital as a source for competitive advantage? What is it? Do you see this already happening, and if not, what needs to change for that to become the reality?
Yeah. Yes. I would respond to your question from the MS&AD's down-to-earth experiences. And what is needed right now is sector-wide or landscape-wide collaboration with the multi-stakeholder. So because now companies struggle to doing the risk assessment on nature alone. But collective action could provide a more tangible nature positive outcomes from our experience. So MS&AD now joined 2 landscape initiatives in Kumamoto Prefecture. So Kumamoto areas enjoy the rich rainfall, and there's a volcano to the soil is easy to infiltrate the rainfall into the ground. So the local community conserves and manages the rich groundwater as their treasure for 100 years. So recently, the Japanese government invite semiconductor manufacturing investment in that area. So there arises the worries about the groundwater decreasing. So MS&AD collaborated with the local university and local government and also the regional bank to develop the initiative to conserve the groundwater to make it the water positive direction. So the solution is nature-based solution. We use the nature-based solution. That is so-called rain garden. That's a kind of the green infrastructure. So that will prevent mitigate the intake from the semiconductor company, intake of groundwater by the semiconductor company, and also the mitigating the flood risks, inland flood risks with that. So that is a benefit for an insurance company as well. And also the increase in the groundwater is a benefit for the local people as well. So now the local bank provide the interest discount for who install the rain gardens. And also MS&AD is ready to provide discount insurance premium to the big facility to install the, such kind of nature-based solutions. So that kind of the collaborative action could provide the tangible nature positive outcomes. So the I would like to, now the investors should ask there's some kind of the semiconductor manufacturing company or the AI data center people to, if they have enough investment to secure the clean water for the input for washing the chips and cleaning chips, cooling chips. So they have enough money to invest to conserve such kind of local natural capital. So I think that they are the sector, one of the sector compromising to integrate nature into their accounting system.
This is fascinating. Thank you for sharing this. I take 2 points away from this in particular. One is there is a need to act locally but collectively around water, because a watershed is used by many players. And then the second point that you made, somewhat in passing, and I wonder if we want to go a bit deeper into this, is you said that your insurance your company was now willing and able to offer discounted insurance premium, which essentially is another way of saying you're reducing the cost of capital for these companies. And I think that's very exciting that we're beginning to see this. We're beginning to see sort of emerging shoots for both collective action, particularly around watersheds, but also lowering costs of capital. And the cost of capital obviously applies in particular to credit markets. So Rong, we'll come to you in a moment for your views on what you're seeing and what you see as the potential. It applies to insurance premium, but it requires a systemic approach because you need the data to be able to do this. And so I was just wondering if either you wanted to just expand on this point of, maybe Makoto, if you don't mind, if I could just ask you to expand briefly, very briefly, on what does the insurance industry need to be able to recognize nature risks in insurance premium? How can you drive that forward? Because that will send a very powerful signal. And then maybe with your permission, Rong, we'll go to you then next to love to get your take on what does this look like, particularly from a credit market perspective. And then Lee, there's obviously a technology role in enabling this.
Yeah, I give you this short comment that the important thing is in Kumamoto is the Kumamoto Prefecture have been monitoring the flow of the groundwater for more than 10 years. So that is important because we have data and we can set the target, how much extension the nature-based solution introduced in that area. So if we have a data, we can set the target for the initiatives.
Okay, so decision-grade data. Rong, can I just ask you to share your views on this?
Absolutely. I think, I want to maybe mention why, it's really imperative for us to understand what nature links to business, especially from a credit perspective, because the impact of nature is now become material for a lot of companies. And just to give some simple examples, it could affect a company's license to operate, right? Some governments are really taking serious investigation and potentially revoke permits required to conduct business activities in certain areas. And then another material factors that we think is really significant is the stranded assets risk, similar to climate, right? Because nowadays, many companies are familiar with understanding climate risk, mitigating climate risk, but it really applies the same concepts to nature. We have done a very interesting analysis on the AI centers. So 22% of the AI centers, existing AI centers, are in key biodiversity areas, according to the UN data, whereas more than 30% of the planned AI data centers are in those areas, which means there is a business decision there to make, right? Are you going to continue investing in those planned data centers, which is not yet there, but it could potentially, be stopped or interrupted by future regulatory implications. So those are really key considerations that people need to start think about because investment are long term, right? Building a data center can take 10 years. And also, we're also thinking, the risk of financial institutions withdrawing investments, as well as disrupted transactions by your potential clients. So those are really the traditional considerations we would factor into a credit analysis, but also really apply to the nature expanded considerations.
Fascinating. And I think these are really powerful examples. So if AI centers are so vulnerable, also exposed to nature risks, the mining industry also comes to mind. And what we're seeing in Europe, which is where I'm based, is we're seeing farming also to become much more vulnerable. Farming is a small part of developed countries' economies, as it is in Japan, also a relatively small part, but it's of course critical for human survival. And we're beginning to see companies, banks in particular, willing to and keen to differentiate their interest rates based on the nature risks that their clients have. The challenge that they're facing is that, or the benefits are that thanks to the work that colleagues like Markov's the Capital Coalition that he leads, a lot of the scientists that were featured earlier, the standards and the physical availability of data aren't the problem. The problem is to have that data available in at the right level of granularity and for specific clients. And so there is a discussion underway in Europe now. What are the ecosystem solutions? An ecosystem now in the sense of a business or financial ecosystem that could enable the banks that are very interested in differentiating their credit rates to do so. I'm just putting this out, and Rong Yu, I was wondering if you wanted to comment on that from a financial data company, basically. That's at the core, that's what S&P does. And then we will turn to Lee to give us a technology perspective.
Sure. So from the data provider perspective, we are seeing a highly growing knowledge within the community, right, to request more data. Especially, as you mentioned, the granularity that needed in order to assess the specific nature risk associated with asset. So I think in the beginning, people wanted to understand where are the risks, and now they want to quantify, right? And especially if we're talking about putting the nature assets into the balance sheet, then you really need to quantify and then integrate it into financial terms. And I think that's what certain scientists like those in our companies are still doing to really translate nature risk impacts into financial terms. And also because nature is very location specific, so having asset information is very important, especially for financial institutions. We want to overlay asset locations with those geospatial data indicating, where are the key biodiversity areas, what are those specific risks associated with that location. And then we're also seeing more interest in the supply chain because a lot of companies started with their own operations, which is relatively easier. The assets types, the dependencies and the impact you're making, but understanding your supply chain is really important for nature. A lot of companies claim that they are business friendly, nature friendly business, but a lot of their impact is actually on the supply chain. We did the CSA last year in 2024. 42% of Japanese companies in the Dow Jones Best-in-Class World Invited Universe, the previous sustainability index, DJSI. So we renamed it into Best-in-Class. So 42% of Japanese companies, they said that they conducted a biodiversity risk assessment already. So it's actually the highest in the Asia Pacific region. And most of the companies, they focus on their operations with a few starting to look into their supply chain. For those are really leading the practice, they're looking into upstream risk and downstream risks are occurring in overseas, not just in the Japan or the adjacent areas. So I think those are the trends we're seeing, and obviously with more and more data available and more robust methodology to support decision making, we can expect a much more high quality disclosure, high quality analysis in the near future.
Thank you. Lee.
Yeah, it's interesting the turn in this conversation. I actually was the editor-in-chief of the Global Risk Report, the World Economic Forum. In fact, I started my career in financial. My first publication was derivative risk, so I follow this. And I just want to clarify one thing, because risks, going back to academic Frank McKnight, this is something we can quantify, right? But we're probably dealing in nature often with uncertainties, because these are not, if we think about transgression of the planetary boundaries, we don't really know how these systems are going to interact. So I think we have to be very careful too to recognize what parts of it is really risk, and that we can get the data and quantify, and which parts of this are uncertainties, and that we have to think a little bit different in terms of scenarios and such, because these are all cascading risks. It's not one thing, it's not linear in some ways, but I do think it's in the right direction to think about a systems effect of what's the water use of every search that we do on AI, right? And certainly the value chain, but some of this stuff embedded in that are uncertainties, because we've not seen them and we're not gonna understand them. So just to keep that in mind. In terms of the question of technology, there's a simple answer for me at least. The technology that will matter the most is the mobile phone. If you think about how we're going to, and I say that, let's step back for a minute. Biodiversity is hard to measure because it's very local, we're told, and of course it's different from climate and carbon, which is more global. But actually, think about how the phone today works and all the enabling, the great platforms, they're very much global and local. That's the Ubers and transport and such. So I think one of the interesting things is that how can we benefit from the fact that we can get very place-based data, very specific data in real time with our phones, and also be part of a larger global community that can actually enable certain transactions. That's what we're going to see. Even the next generation of AI will be device-based. And I'll share one anecdote. The third asset that's reached highest price levels outside of gold and Bitcoin this week is arguably Pokemon cards, and I think it's appropriate to mention that. And my son this summer met with my nephew. It's actually maybe a disservice that my nephew is still in his 30s, a very big collector of such. And what was interesting was what they traded with real money, which I said, okay, it's fine, but it wasn't the card. It was Pokemon Go characters, because my son is in Switzerland and my nephew was in California, Hawaii, and there were certain characters that they couldn't get, right, because of the location. And just sort of think about that if we could also bring in this element of not only the mobile phone piece, the digitalization, but the gamification piece. And then I think we're on to something that could help us back to your early point about can we, the tokenization of some of these things, because we can look at the elements where we can create a global community and exchange. We can also be very specific as to place, right, in particular biome and species, and can we have, and back it up against a very solid blockchain possibly. So there's elements in all of this, but I do think it starts with the one technology that is, an amazing technology today that enables so many things for all of us starts with that mobile device that we have in our coat pocket.
Fantastic. So we heard about another Japanese solution that we should apply and scale up. I was wondering if we have a little bit more time, because unfortunately we were not able to get Vera Songwe online, so that's very regrettable. She would have spoken to the macroeconomics of this, and and the finance minister's perspective, because her work has shown, just like I think all three panelists here have said, is that nature and nature risks in particular are now material in the business language, in the language of economists. We call them macro-critical, and we're seeing now that nature risks are beginning to have a significant impact on countries' credit ratings. This is what some of your colleagues, Rong Yu, in the sovereign risk in the sovereign ratings departments are doing. We're beginning to see countries getting knocked down in their credit ratings because of climate and nature risks. We've seen 1 notch, in extreme cases 2 notches, and those translate into very material and significant increases in the cost of capital. So far, it's a one-way street. It can only go down. Because, as we've also touched on briefly in the earlier panel, we haven't yet included into standard macroeconomic models the benefits of investing in resilience. And we've heard one very powerful example here around the watershed management, how ultimately the enterprise value of the semiconductor companies can be maintained and increased through greater resilience to water stress. And if you ladder this up, if you aggregate this up across many different initiatives in the country, this does become macroeconomically significant. It does become macroeconomically significant for Japan and really any country around the world. And Vera would have spoken very eloquently with lots of practical examples of how this work is now beginning to change the way in which finance ministers are looking at nature. Just like we're beginning to see more and more business executives take the nature risks seriously as material factors to their well-being. We've heard in the earlier panel from Oji how better stewardship of nature also creates business opportunities. It increases the capital base, broadly understood, of companies. So things are moving in a fairly good direction, but as Dominic reminded us, we're not quite there yet. So if I may just, and this is a question that we didn't rehearse, but if I could just ask each panelist to think about, we've heard about many different things. We've heard about the science, we've heard about the data, we've heard about the standards, we've heard about initial business example, and each one of you was able to point to some really promising examples. But if we're taking a step back and say, what is needed to take this to scale? I was wondering if I could invite each one of you to think about the one thing. What is the one thing that you propose to focus on and that you would like to drive in order to put nature on the balance sheet? Who would like to start? Lee, we'll start with you.
So we talked quite a bit about risk, and which is another way of looking. It's about fear, right? In some ways, right? So my thing is, what I think we're not balanced enough is that we need to get people and play to a different fear, the fear of missing out. If you want nature finance to work, then there has to be this FOMO, right? The fear of missing out on this opportunity. And that's what we're not doing enough of, because of course this is very serious risk. We're stewards here, but again, kind of we have to play to those animal spirits. And you know, we talked earlier, there was a big attention given to when BlackRock mentioned that we need to take nature capital seriously. It's more, you know, ecosystem services are more than 50% of global GDP, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, they also had FOMO, and they created a fund on Bitcoin, and they have $96 billion of Bitcoin, right, in that fund today. So there's got to be something where we collectively, the community has to say that this is also a great opportunity we're missing. And I think the data points that once we get a cost curve, and we're starting to see that, then we can actually trade on that. And I think that's where the really opportunity lies, is to see where that curve goes and draw people in.
FOMO, that's your one-line summary. Okay, who would like to go next? We'll go to you, Michael, and then Rong Yu will go to you.
Thank you. Yeah, among the TNFD adopter, Japanese adopters, including the major banks and major insurance company and major asset managers. So, but I had a discussion with them that transmission channel from the corporate risk linked to the financial impact for insurance. That is relatively clear. But for asset managers and banks, they haven't linkage. They haven't found linkage. It's difficult for them to find the linkage right now. TNFD issue on that the discussion paper on that. So one of the important points I would mention is that we should find many use cases to how to link the corporate risks and opportunity go into the financial impact for the banks or investors. So yeah, that's the important point for us.
Thank you. Rong Yu.
Yeah, I was going to say that in order to scale up, I think the business sector really need to see a clear business case, right? And in order to understand whether there is a business case, people need to start doing. So you learning by doing. So I would encourage our business, our financial sector professionals to start understanding nature risk, assess it, quantify it using the existing available methodologies. And I reckon that there are a lot of challenges, right? I want to share one interesting challenge that one of our clients raised. They actually used the data to analyze their portfolio. They were able to generate very interesting results. But when they get to disclosure stage, they're a little struggled because they're not sure if they are in the position to disclose because they come from an island country, right? And they have a very extensive portfolio representing almost every part of the island. So if they disclose their analysis, it's almost like, you know, doing the job of Ministry of Environment, because they may say, okay, this part of this country is high risk. And, you know, there is the sensitivity that whether, you know, a business is justified enough to make that conclusion and be representative. So a lot of new challenges will emerge once people start doing the actual work. And I think, you know, the solution will come out when there are enough cases to be discussed. Thanks.
Fascinating, and this reminds me, we spoke earlier this morning about the Foraco example, the Australian company that was able to put nature on the balance sheet. We have too few good examples now, but it's a very good one that everyone speaks about. But what I found really interesting, and you Rong, that this connects to the point that you've just made, is that then we later found out, or the CEO later found out, that virtually every forestry company in Australia has looked at this and has replicated this analysis internally, but they've kept this number confidential because they were worried about disclosure. Because this is obviously market relevant information. There might be other reasons, I could imagine, litigation, and so I think there is a very important lever that is needed, which also connects us back to the earlier conversation about policy, is where that information can be, where companies are enabled and encouraged and supported in bringing that information into the public domain. Because there's a lot more happening under the surface than is widely known. If I can just abuse my privilege as moderator and add my one point to this, which I think very consistent with what you've all said, is if I'm looking at the margin where I think the most immediate opportunities are, and this is a journey, you know, we're not aiming for, we will reach perfection initially, but eventually, but it's going to take a long time. It's a journey that starts with the first few steps, and many steps have been taken, but among the next steps that I see, and it's a big one, is to really integrate natural capital, and particularly the risks related to the poor management of natural capital into the cost of capital. And I'm seeing this both in private markets, private credit, where lots of interesting conversations are happening, and we're beginning to see how the pieces can be put together to this becoming a systemic feature of credit markets to price as risks. We're beginning to see this in the insurance market. The problem today is that in many insurance markets, insurers are simply withdrawing coverage from assets they find too risky. So how do we include that risk into the cost of insurance while making it while allowing the markets to grow, because that's really what we need. And this is what Vera would have spoken about. We're also beginning to see this at the sovereign level. And I'm very encouraged by early shoots that suggest that countries can not only increase their growth forecast by about in the order of 1 to perhaps 2 percentage points per year through the better inclusion of nature, natural capital, and risks. And that then translates into very tangible reductions in the cost of capital and the debt carrying capacity. We're at time, so I'd like to thank the three panelists for a lively and very rich discussion. Thank you.